everyone, Noid Games here with another video in the tutorial series of remaking the core version of Getaway Shootout. In the last video, we focused on getting health UI implemented into the game, so now each player displays health when they are injured. And in this video, we'll be continuing UI with the player power-up UI, and that's these icons at the bottom. And these icons will display the amount of uses or the amount of ammo left in the current player's power-up. And we'll use that to kind of just update as the player keeps using the weapon to update this UI. And this will actually be the last video in the tutorial series because at this point, a lot of the core components are implemented into the game. And after this, you could just really polish up the game and add your own features to make it a fully functional game. So this is where we'll be leaving off the series. So let's get into the actual implementing the UI today. And so as I was mentioning, the UI is just going to be the exact same as the original game. And the way it will work is I actually already implemented a little bit of the UI game objects before the video. But I have kind of a list of icons that I can toggle on and off depending on how many bullets or usable times it can be used. And what we'll do with each of these icons is when it is used, it'll turn black, displaying that the bullet has been used. And basically when all the bullets are used, then we'll actually disable the UI. I should note, this is just one way of displaying a UI for a power-up. You could do something simple like a text up here or some sort of metered bar. But I thought this is just a nice visual way to display something like ammo in a gun or just other power-ups in the scene. Okay, so with that out of the way, let's actually get into implementing this UI. And the first thing that we'll do is to actually add the icons for each power-up. So before the video, I imported the sprites for each power-up icon, and this is just in the icons folder in the sprites folder. And this will just be each kind of bullet for each power-up: shotgun, sniper, teleport bullet, and we'll just be using these to actually have it to be displayed on the UI for each player. So the next thing to do then is to actually make a reference to these sprites, and I'll make this reference on that power-up item that we've created. So if I go to our resources folder and go to power-ups, we have a list of these power-up items, which are scriptable objects. And currently we just have a small list of other data that is for each power-up. So what I'll do first is to add this UI icon to this power-up item. So opening up the script here, we already have a sprite for the icon displayed on the power-up box. Perhaps we could rename this to icon box or something like that. I'll leave it how it is, and then right below it I'll add another sprite, and I'll call this ammo icon. And this will just be the icons for displaying on the UI for each player of how many uses they have left. So I'm going to save that and then now jump back to the scene. So now that we've added that field to the power-up item, the next thing to do is to actually assign these items or these sprites. So I'm just going to go through each one quickly to assign it. So the first one is bomb. I'll assign the bomb sprite for the bomb. Actually, I'll just pause it quick because it's going to be pretty redundant. I'm just going to go through each power-up and assign it. Okay, so at this point, I have assigned all of the icons to each power-up. And now this will just make it easy so we know what icon to display for each power-up when we are doing the UI. So the next thing to do is to actually create that UI script for now displaying the UI in the game. So I'm going to go to the scripts folder, and I'll navigate to the UI folder and create that script there. And I'll go to scripting, and I'll call this one maybe just Power Up UI, and create that. Okay, so now I have it opened up in the editor, and this class might be a little big because it's going to be doing a lot of functionality for activating each icon and deactivating it and so forth. So it's possible that after this video, I might split it up, or you could split it up in the future. But for this video, we're just going to do it all in this Power Up UI script. So the first thing I'll do is to kind of template what we want. So we want 3 methods to actually make the whole UI functional. So the 3 methods I'm thinking of is one, something like on create, and this is when the player first gets a power up in their inventory or when they collect it. So we want to know when this happens, and this would be just a usable, something like this. So that's going to be the first method that we're going to be listening for. And the next thing that we want to know and update the UI when it happens is when we actually use the power up. So something like on use. And we'll do some logic here of actually changing the amount of icons we have displayed. And then the last method that we'll be kind of implementing with this class is something like on depletion. And this is when the power up is fully depleted. At this point, we want to disable the UI, so it's no longer showing since we don't have a power up in our hand anymore. Okay, so these 3 methods are basically going to be the ones that we're listening for, and then that's when we update the UI. So the next thing to do then would actually now subscribe or call these methods when the actual action happens. So we're going to need to get a reference to the player power up, and for right now, I'll just create something like this, player power up. Something like that, just a reference for right now. And we'll just do something like this. So player power up, player power up. And the player power up script, if I jump to it actually right now, there it is. We actually already created some events. So we have the on power up create and on power up deplete. So that'd be pretty simple to subscribe to the first 2. So something like player power up on power up create. And this will already pass the usable item that it created as a parameter. So we can easily just do this method here on power up create to subscribe to that. Same thing for the depletion. So player power up on power up deplete. We can just subscribe with the on depletion. Okay, so then the last one that we need to kind of subscribe to is this on use. And that's going to be a little more difficult since the on use is actually called through this usable. So we'll actually need to be doing it every time we create a new usable is to subscribe it down here. So if we do something like usable and we actually have an event on this usable class, something called onUse. So whenever we use that usable, call our own function down here. And when we deplete the power-up, when the power-up is getting removed, just unsubscribe from this method down here. And we'll actually need a reference to this usable since it's only passed on creation. So we'll just create like a temporary variable up here. So if we do something like this, and I'll just set it up top to store that usable. So now this way we can actually unsubscribe from the method down here. Okay, so at this point, we should be fully subscribed to kind of each of the three main methods that this UI is going to be using. The next thing to actually do would be to actually hook up this player power-up, because right now it's not being set at all. It's just being a private method. So that's going to be something that we did similar to the previous video, or with the scoreboard UI video, is to actually set it through the game manager. So if I go to the game manager, and right here we have the scoreboard UI. So I think what we'll do for right now is to create another reference and set each one there. Or let me check, I forget exactly what we did with the health UI. Oh, right. Okay, it's under the camera component. So each power-up is going to be under the camera UI, since we want separate power-up UIs for each player. So we'll do something like this where we get each camera and basically get the player power-up UI and initialize it with the corresponding element that we want to initialize with. So I will do something very similar to that. Something like this, auto-completed. So something like init, and basically we want to pass in the player power-up that we want to listen to. So we'll do something like player power-up, and we'll do something like player power-up. And all we have to do is just set the reference to the player power-up. So I'll save that. And then now when we get to here, we want to do something very similar to the health as we did before. And basically set each power-up UI to the corresponding player power-up. So if I do get component in children, power-up UI, and then init, and we want to initialize it with the corresponding player, and each player should have a power-up or a player power-up script. So we'll do something like player power-up. We'll say PU, and same thing, just get the component directly on the player, and that will be the player power-up. Something like that. And you can already see, so this is only 2 UI scripts, but say if we had like something like 5 UI scripts, I don't think it would be really ideal to do it in the game manager here in this for loop. I think it'd be better to actually have a whole separate script to manage the player UI, and basically just give the player UI the player object, and then the player UI would set each kind of component separately. But since there's only 2 scripts right now, I think it'll be fine to include it like this. Okay, I'll save that and then now jump back to the player power-up. So at this point, we have the methods all created and subscribed to. The next thing to do is to actually implement the logic of creating the UI icons and actually kind of removing the icons. So I'm going to jump back to the scene here quick, and because as I was saying at the beginning of the video, I've already done some of the UI creating it, since I didn't want it to be super tedious in the video. But how I set it up is just using a horizontal layout group. That way we can kind of enable as many icons as you want, and it'll just nicely kind of horizontally pad at the bottom here. And the idea will be we just activate the amount of icons that we need. So say if we only need 3 icons, we set 3 game objects active. And then also importantly, we would change the sprite to whatever sprite that we're using. So say if it's a shotgun, we would have the shotgun bullet as the sprite. And then, as I was mentioning before, once each one gets used, we'll just turn it black to make it disappear and be used. Okay, so that's kind of just the overview of what we'll be doing. So we'll be doing all that in code and the script that we just created. So actually, I'll first attach that player power-up or power-up UI. So now we have the power-up UI on this game object, and so what we'll be doing is changing all this children. So it's directly below this power-up UI that all the children will be. So that'll make it really easy to kind of access that. So the first method that we'll implement is the onCreate. And this method will want to set the sprite to be the correct sprite for the power-up. And maybe I'll do something like here, down here. Something like set sprites, where we can pass in the sprite that we want to set sprites to. And all we want to do is basically just change all the children to the correct sprite. So if we do something like a for loop, and actually we can just do a for each loop. So this is kind of just an easier way to do a loop with the children. If you just do a for each loop, and then Unity kind of completes this. If you do a for each loop in a transform, it'll just loop to the children. So this will access each child, and basically we just want to get the image component, because that is the UI, Unity's UI for the image, and that correctly imported up here. And basically for each image, we just want to change the sprite to the sprite icon that we are setting for this power-up. So we'll do this at the onCreation. Basically we'll call it up here, and we just want to set sprites. And so at the beginning of the video, we set the ammo icon in this power-up item scriptable object, and we only have access to this usable object. So one thing to do is to actually get that power-up item, and if we go to the player power-up, we actually have a method, and actually I did this before the video. It's just to make a method to get the current power-up item. So we'll just call that to easily get that. So if I do something like power-up item, and then we'll just use that method. So player power-up get power-up item to retrieve the current power-up item. And then from there, we can finally use the oops, we can use the ammo icon that we have just set at the beginning of the video. Okay, so at this point, all we've done is to set the sprite icons. The next thing to do is to actually set the number of icons. So say if we have 4 bullets, we want to set 4 game objects active and so forth. So we'll do something like maybe, I mean, I guess this could just be one method down here. So if we did something like init sprites, something like that. That way we can pass in the number as well. So something like 4 would be 4 bullets. And I'll create a parameter there. This is going to be another easy function. So we'll do something like a for loop. So for I equals 0, I less than num, I plus. Now we just want to loop through each children in our game objects, or in our transform, and basically set them active if they're less than a number, or if they're greater than, set it deactive. And actually, just thinking about it now, I think it'd be better to actually loop through all the children, something like transform child count. That way we can also set the children deactive in this loop as well. So if I do something like transform get child, so this gets the child at index I. So with each child, we basically want to set the game object, set active, and we only want to set active if the child index is less than this number. If it's greater than that number, that means that that's like a bullet that we want deactive. So we can just do this with a simple Boolean condition. If I is less than num, and basically that will set that. Might be less than equal if I think here. So if I is 0 and num 1, no, I think that is correct. Just the less than sign. And basically something simple like that works for our case. Okay, so at this point I've only set the initialize sprites to be a constant 4. Obviously, we want to set this to be the exact number of ammo or amount of times that the usable can be used. And this can be a little tricky since this usable class, if I jump to it here, is an abstract class, and we set it up to be kind of as abstract as possible, so many different usable objects can be implemented with this class, and it has no ammo variable, no number, and the only ammo variable is actually defined in, let's see, is it the gun class? Yeah, the gun class, which is just extending this usable class, actually has numbers for the ammo size and so forth. So we're going to have to actually do something to actually switch between the type of this usable object here. And based on that type, then we'll be able to get the corresponding usable ammo or the amount of times it can be used, and basically switch between that. So what I'll be doing is to actually do a switch statement. And actually, I kind of forget exactly how to get the type or switch between types. Let me just look that up quick. Okay, so I was just looking it up, and actually it looks like pretty simple syntax. So if I switch between the usable object, and basically you can create a case for each type of this usable object by just doing case and then the type of the object. So if it is type gun, and I'll just write gun as a reference, then we can do whatever we want with this gun. And basically at the top of this switch statement, I'm just going to say something like num and default it to 1. So in the case of gun, then we want to do something like gun dot ammo clip size, I believe is the kind of the value that we want. Let me just jump back to the ammo. So we could do something like get current ammo. But I think the ammo clip size is actually what we want, or start ammo. It's kind of how I set it up. So I set it up with the gun can have multiple clips. So it kind of depends how you want it kind of rendered on the UI. In the case that there's multiple clips, maybe you just want to render the clips and not the actual bullets. So let's see. I guess if we could do a simple check here to check to make sure that the start ammo is less than or equal to the ammo clip size. If that's the case, then we'll render the bullets, and then otherwise we'll actually just render the amount of clips, something like that. But just to start off with, we'll maybe just do something like start ammo. So start ammo. Okay, so that's one case of this usable object. And actually at this point, we don't have many other usable classes. If I jump to usable right here, we have the health, and health is just its own class. But I think for health and for basically any other usable object, we'd like to just default it to 1, which is the default up here. So I'll just leave it actually as that, and I'll just make a little note. To add more usable types here. So if you have different kind of usable objects that have their own kind of way of being rendered, say if you had something like a tank or some sort of liquid, and you want it to not be rendered as kind of like sprites, you want it to be like a metered bar, you can make a case here and then activate the correct kind of UI below right here. But since it is pretty simple, we have gun or not gun, we can just write one case like this for right now. Okay, so with that out of the way, I'm going to pass in the number down here. And this method now is kind of complete. We set the current icon, and we also set the number that we want. So the next thing to do is to actually do the onUse. So onUse, we want to basically update the sprites, turning some sprites black depending if they're already used. So the way we can do that is to actually, again, we're going to have to switch between this usable. So, and we have a reference to the usable up there. So if we do something like this again, so when it is used, if it is a type gun, the number is not going to be the start ammo, but it's going to be something like the get the current ammo, because that's a method that we've created in this ammo or this gun class, which just returns the current ammo. And basically we want to use that as our number. Otherwise, the default will actually be 0, because Everything else is just a one-time usable object, and setting that to 0 should be good. And all we want to do is now to update the sprites to basically turn the sprites that have already been used to black. So if we do something like maybe a function down here and pass in the number of sprites that are still currently active, then at this point we can do a for loop, do something very similar up here, and basically start at the number and loop till all the rest of the children are completed, and basically set each one to the color black. So if we do something like transform like child, get component image color equals color dot black. Oop. Now this just reminded me, so we'll actually need to set this back to white. Otherwise, once image turns black, there's no way of kind of getting reset. So we can either do that in the initialize or on depletion. I think it'll just be better to do it on initialize. So if we do something like this in this for loop here, we can do this by just setting the color to be white, and that way it'll be reset to just the normal sprite that is shown. Now there's one thing to note that I didn't really mention. So by default, I just created, let's say, 9 icons as our kind of usable UI, the max amount of icons. So if the weapon or the usable object has more than 9 bullets, it will only show a max of 9. So you could create more icons down here, or you could create it dynamically in the script somewhere, maybe on initialization. But I think in this case, it's going to be fine to just kind of have a default max of 9, since in most cases, it probably won't go over that. Okay, so I'm just jumping back to the script here now. The next thing we'd have to do is actually call this update sprites method. And that's simply just going to be update sprites with this number that we calculated up here. And yeah, that should be basically all it is for this on use. Again, it's pretty simple for now, since there's mainly just one or two types of usable objects: a gun, which has a number of ammo, and not gun, which just defaults to only a one-time use. So it's a pretty easy calculation for the number of sprites that we want to show. And yeah, at this point, the last thing to do is to use or implement this on depletion method. And for this, all we have to really do is to basically deactivate the game object. We could deactivate all the children, but I think it's actually fine just to deactivate the whole entire game object. So if we do game object.set active to false, this should just make all the UI disappear once we deplete the power up. And the only other thing we have to do is to remember to activate the game object when we get a new power up. So something like game object set active true, and something like that. I guess there's one thing I have to check, and I'm pretty sure it will be fine, but if the game object is set active false, I believe the events still fire, like on create, on use, but that would just be one thing that we have to check. And at this point, I think we could save it and actually test this out. So I save the script, and I'll actually just disable all the icons to start with. And maybe actually just disable the game object to start with. Something like that. And now jumping back to the game. And then I'll click play to actually see if anything happens when we collect a sprite. Okay, so we already got an error in the game log. So it was... So the object is not set to reference. So I believe it's having a tough time getting this player or power up UI. And that actually could be for the reason that we disabled this UI. Let me just check if enabling it works. Okay, so yeah, I guess to begin with, we'll have it enabled so the game manager can find it. And then now if I collect a sprite, okay, so I collected the shotgun in the game, and we have now 3 icons shown, which is corresponding to the 3 bullets. So if I use it once, the right icon is turned to black. Twice, now it's 2 times used, and then 3 times the power up UI is actually disappears, which is what we want. And then now if I test it with another weapon, okay, so I grab another weapon. Now this time it's a pistol, so we have the pistol bullets showing. And again, if I use it multiple times, each one is being used. And then collecting the health pack, that is being shown there. Seems like the health pack is a little small. And that could be how I set up the UI. I kind of made it try to adjust to the correct size, but maybe that's something you can play around with. But using that, the UI correctly adjusts that. And player 2, it should work as well. So it's able to collect the power up and actually display it. Okay, so at this point, it actually looks like the power-ups are being displayed correctly in the UI. There is one thing that hopefully I can get, is with the SMG gun, it should, I think it'll be displayed wrong since we're doing bullets instead of clips, as I was mentioning at the beginning of the video, but let me check that. But I can quickly kind of navigate to the SMG if I just manually override it. So if I go to this power-up box and set the overriding item to SMG, and then collect it, should... Oh, okay, now if I collect it now... Okay, so yeah, it's displaying the max amount of icons because the number of bullets is like something like 16, but in this case we wanted to display the number of clips, and yeah, perhaps we can do that quickly in the code. So if I navigate to the power up UI, it's just going to be changing this number of ammo based on if we want to display clips or if we want to display just the ammo bullets. So if I hop to the gun, and basically this is all going to be determined by, again, the start ammo and the ammo clip size. And I believe this start ammo doesn't change. Yeah, correct? Okay. So I think just a simple way to kind of change this for right now is to just check the condition. If the start ammo is greater than clip size, then we'll be just displaying clips. Otherwise, we'll just display individual bullets. So if I go to Power Up UI, and I'll do this condition here. So I'll do it one line too. So if I do something like gun dot start ammo, if it's greater than gun dot clip size, oops. And this is just a one line thing where basically this is the Boolean statement, and then with the question mark, you could have two cases. The first case is if we are displaying clips, and that we can do by, so we only have one method, that is get current ammo. We could just calculate it, I guess, just in line here by doing a simple calculation like this. And then otherwise, if we're displaying bullets, which is the second case here, we again just get the default get ammo, get current ammo like that, and that should be good. The only case here though, we actually want to round up, since if we have just a small amount of bullets in the last clip, we still want to display that clip in the game. So we can do something like math dot, I think it is, let's see, we want seal to ent, and something like this should be good. There might be a better way to actually seal it. I forget in C# if there is an operator that can just do that. But something like that should work for now. And up here, we actually want to check something similar. And actually, we'll do pretty much the exact same thing. So num. I'll just copy from there. And again, we check start ammo greater than ammo clip size. And instead of doing get current ammo, I'll just do the start ammo. And the same thing over here. Okay, I'm just gonna save that. And then I'm just gonna check to make sure it properly works. So I'm gonna change one of these to the SMG and double check that it is working. Okay, first was the throwing knife, so those, that didn't seem to actually, maybe we broke something there, because I just used it once and both of them are disappeared. Let me check quick on this. Okay, this actually looks like it's correctly being displayed. We have 4 clips like the original game. And okay, so we did do something wrong here because just after one use, it's being set to 0. Oh, and actually, I accidentally did something like that. But if we jump to the odd use, we must be. If I jump to the gun here, okay, actually that makes sense. So this get current ammo function is just returning the amount of ammo in the clip. So we actually want to actually get the total ammo, which I guess is listed as a function here. But we have no way of returning it. So what I'll do actually down here is just make quickly another function, and I'll call it get cur clip. And basically we'll do that same calculation, just with those two, or just with the total amount of ammo. So something like the current clip ammo plus cur extra ammo. And this is kind of, maybe I set this up just poorly with this gun class. It might be better to actually just have one variable as like total ammo, but I guess these specifics don't matter too much. But with the total ammo, we want to do a similar calculation where we divide it by the clip size. And I'll do something like math.ceil and return that. Okay. Now with this, when we use it, instead of calculating it ourselves here, we'll be using the gun's get current clip. Okay, now let me just quick test that to see if that's working. So again, I'll set this one to be the SMG. So I picked up the SMG, and then if I use it multiple times, okay, so that seems better. And if I use the whole gun, then it correctly disappears like that. Let me collect another weapon just to make sure I didn't break anything over here. Okay, so this is throwing knife. Use it once, it's gone once. Use it twice. Okay, so that now seems to be correctly displaying the SMG, which has multiple clips. That is just kind of like a small case of the system, since that's the only gun that uses the clips. But it does kind of just show for each kind of different usable weapon that you would add in the game, you can kind of just add logic in this usable or power up UI class to kind of switch between cases and to actually compute the correct amount of ammo that you want to display on the screen. If in case that you have a bunch of different usable objects and it starts getting pretty complex, you could break down this power up UI class into smaller classes. But at this stage in the game, I think it's completely fine to have it just in one class here to display and also just to update the on use and so forth all in one. So I think that's how we'll leave it. So at this point, that is the player power up UI implemented into the game. And that will be it for this core version of the Getaway Shootout. I will make one more video kind of just wrapping up this series and kind of explaining some more things you can implement, because there is still some stuff that you could add for polish, like characters and other sort of things that the original game has. And maybe I'll just talk through kind of how you would go about adding that into the game. And also, if you have any questions or anything that wasn't clear in the tutorial series, feel free to leave that in the comments, and I'll hopefully address that in the next video or in the comments below. So thank you for watching, and see you in the last video.